If I'm advising a Democratic politician right now, it's you can do two things at once. You can distinguish yourself from crypto grift and the Trump family self-dealing. And guess what? The American people can be trusted to tell the difference between self-dealing scams and a generational shift in money and finance.
Welcome back, everybody. We are here at the Bitcoin Policy Summit in Washington, D.C. I am Frank Corva, the political correspondent for Bitcoin Magazine, and I am joined by none other than Troy Cross, a man who wears many hats, a fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute, founder of the Nakamoto Project, as well as a philosophy professor at Reed College. Troy, thank you so much for sitting down to join us today.
Thanks for talking to me, Frank.
The pleasure is all ours. You were just on the main stage here, the only stage, if you will, talking a little bit about some of the data from the research that you just conducted. Could you give us a high-level overview of what you just found?
We did a survey last year of 3,538 American adults on Bitcoin ownership and adoption. We redid that survey with some new questions this year, again with 3,538 Americans. It's the largest survey that's been done to date on Bitcoin ownership in America. I'll give you some top lines from the study if you like.
Please.
One is we found 18.6% of Americans say they own Bitcoin in one of many ways. They might own it in self-custody, they might own it on an exchange, they might own it through an ETF, they might own it by jointly owning with a family member. But when asked, do you own in one of those ways, 18.6% of Americans or 48 million adults say they own Bitcoin. That's a very large contingent. Another top line is that 4.21% of Americans, or 11 million people, claim to own Bitcoin in self-custody. They have their own keys, they sign their own transactions. That's something that certain regulators have characterized as a kind of shadowy supercoder behavior, but it's actually 11 million Americans who already do that. Bitcoin ownership is widespread. It's one of the things we found. Another thing we found is that it leans heavily male and heavily younger, and also heavily non-white. This year we found non-white Americans were twice as likely to own Bitcoin as white Americans. Politically, last year we shocked everyone by saying that Bitcoin ownership is not political. Bitcoin owners look like a bell curve on the left to right ideology spectrum. Just like America, most Bitcoiners are moderate. This year, we saw a slight shift to the right among Bitcoin owners. We lost some liberals, we gained some conservatives, but it's still center heavy. I would say center right rather than center this year. On sentiment towards Bitcoin, we saw sentiment slightly decline, especially among women and especially among liberals. So our findings are kind of mixed this year. Like on the one hand, Bitcoin doubled in price between our two, more than doubled in price between our two surveys. We get institutional adoption like crazy, ETF growth, treasury, Bitcoin treasury companies growing, governments adopting Bitcoin. But on the other hand, sentiment towards Bitcoin did not grow along with it.
Okay.
And so we're kind of in the institutional era of Bitcoin, where retail is a bit, stagnant.
100%. So yeah, retail adoption a bit diminished compared to maybe both corporate and nation state adoption, if you will.
Very much so.
A question, so you said you're sort of moving in a direction now where there's more people on the right owning it. Do you think that Trump's presidency, this administration, has anything to do with that? Do you think Trump has introduced certain people on the right to Bitcoin?
Well, what's interesting is that we don't see so much gain on the right as we do loss on the left.
Okay.
And, the right, like sentiment on the right is right exactly where it was last year. Sentiment on the left is lower. If you looked at it without ever having seen our results from last year, you would say, oh, Bitcoin is very centrist, center right. It would surprise you because in the media, in social media, and certainly in DC discourse, Bitcoin talk is very politicized.
Yeah. And
our data shows that there's a great silent majority of Bitcoin owners who are either left-wing and they don't talk about it, but they own it, or they're in the middle and they don't have strong feelings. They're not going to speak up on Twitter or something, but they own it, or they think well of it. This is kind of what the surveys are showing us. It's been missing from these other ways we find out about Bitcoin, Bitcoin conferences or anything else. A lot of Bitcoin owners it's not their life. They're not going to show up to a conference. They're not going to be here, but they might have some on Coinbase or on Trust Wallet or MetaMask. They show up in our survey and there's lots of them.
Okay.
There's actually very few people who love Bitcoin or who hate Bitcoin. Most people are in the middle, don't know that much about it, are politically neutral. That's what shows up in our survey.
Interesting.
But it's your question, like, yes, undoubtedly. What's amazing is that, of course, Bitcoin shifted to the right. We have two orange brands, both very powerful. The Bitcoin brand is very strong. Something like 90-something% of people recognize the brand, say they know about it. They don't understand it, but they know about it. The only brand that's stronger is the Donald Trump brand, the other orange brand. And we have those two brands melding really from both sides. Donald Trump kind of co-branding himself with Bitcoin. David Bailey, Bitcoin Magazine, branding Bitcoin as Trump coin as well, for better or for worse. And that's a very powerful branding effort from both sides. What's amazing is that it hasn't shifted very much. Political ideology and Bitcoin ownership. This year, there's a slight correlation. And that's all that happened as a result of this incredibly contentious election and super strong branding effort from both Bitcoin and from Donald Trump.
Understood. So when it comes to, I think also we're seeing more politicians on the right embrace Bitcoin as well. If we were to sort of think about it, as you were saying, there's a little bit more people on the right in terms of ownership. There's obviously a lot more representation on the right, in both the Senate and in Congress more broadly. Do you think that the left eventually comes around more, that we see more Richie Torreses, that we see more Ro Khannas, politicians who very much, maybe they're not sort of, making Bitcoin the central focus of their campaign, but they're coming up with a stance that says, hey, yeah, this is a neutral technology. We should embrace it like we've embraced other technologies like the internet. Do you see Democrats coming around more broadly, I guess, than they have? And also, do you think, yesterday I was in a Senate hearing with Senator Lummis, and she talked a little bit about how because of Trump's family dealings with crypto, there have been some people on the left who have sort of pushed back a little bit. Do you think we get over that hump and people start to differentiate, especially differentiate between Bitcoin being something different than the broader crypto space and saying, yes, this is a technology that we want to stand behind as Democrats?
You got to ask exactly the same question to Brent Buchanan, because his survey focused on likely voters. And he also asked questions about whether finding out that a candidate was pro-Bitcoin would make you more or less likely to vote for them. His findings are amazing. What he found was that even if you're a Democrat, your voters are Democratic, they're more likely to vote for you if you're pro-Bitcoin, even if they don't own Bitcoin. So and of course, Bitcoin owners are much more likely to vote for you or support you. So there's really no downside for a politician to support Bitcoin, except the reputational risk among other politicians and maybe activists in the party. But among voters, there's no downside. So yes, I think the Ro Khannas and the Richie Torreses this is a moment for them. They're right to point out the scams in crypto and the self-dealing of the Trump family. They are absolutely right to point that out. If they throw the baby of Bitcoin out with the bathwater of crypto scams, they will make an enormous and historic mistake, and they will never regain power. What we saw was that Bitcoin and crypto may have made the difference in the last election.
Swung the election.
Very potentially could have cost the Democrats the election. We also see younger males who are into Bitcoin. I mean, yes, Richie Torres and Ro Khanna can go after them from the Democratic side, but another possibility is that Republicans reach out to centrist Democrats who are younger and male, particular, and they draw them into the party. And we leave Democrats with only older people and only women. And that could be disastrous for the Democratic Party and accelerate the trends that they're already experiencing.
Yeah.
If I'm advising a Democratic politician right now, you can do two things at once. You can distinguish yourself from crypto grift and the Trump family self-dealing. And at the same time, you can embrace the future of finance. You can embrace financial inclusion and human rights. And you can embrace the youth and technology. You don't have to do these. And the path is really clear. Bitcoin is neutral, unlike the crypto scams. It benefits everyone. It didn't start with self-dealing, unlike everything else. Embrace Bitcoin and start there. Keep it ethical, keep it above board. Don't mix your own holdings with your policies that you're advocating for.
Meaning like some coins or tokens that you own.
Don't start issuing meme coins.
Yeah.
And be vigorous about calling out scams.
Okay.
And guess what? The American people can be trusted to tell the difference between self-dealing scams and a generational shift in in money and finance. And you have to articulate what that is and defend it. Democrats need to rise to this, capture the demographic that they're losing, and take them back from the Republicans who are going to walk away with it if they don't do anything. I don't know if Democrats can do that. That's what they need to do.
My last question here, so you just talked about things like financial inclusion, this generational shift in the way we look at money. I would say almost civilizational shift in the way that we look at money.
Yes.
So I know that you have spoken with some Democrats. How much of what you're doing is sort of an educational lift? How much are you sort of filling them in on philosophies that underpin what the Human Rights Foundation is doing with using Bitcoin as a money for activists and a money for people of a money of last resort, if you will, for people who have been cut off from banking systems, living under authoritarian regimes? Is this common knowledge to the average Democrat politician or not necessarily?
It is not.
It is not.
Early on, I had a discussion with somebody who said, when you mention Bitcoin on Capitol Hill, what people, like 80% of people's brains is immediately taken up by Elon Musk, and another 10% by Sam Bankman-Fried. This was a little while ago. And then they only have like 10% left for anything else you might say about Bitcoin. I think we've got a little bit more room now, but lawmakers are busy. They're dealing with a lot of issues. And there are more heated and more pressing issues around whatever it is, immigration, war, Doge, and the government. So we are not at the top of the list. So yeah, just a shameless plug for BPI here. The work that the fellows are doing, the work that the leadership at Bitcoin Policy Institute is doing is absolutely vital. If we don't educate people in depth on the issues, what we end up with is tribalism.
Yep.
And signaling. And it's like associationist psychology. Oh, we have this image of Trump and he did something good for Bitcoin. Oh, it must be bad because Orange Man bad. And it's simplistic thinking.
Yeah.
It's not how we solve problems. It's a terrible way to govern. But we're stuck with that unless we do the hard work of research, thinking, tabletop exercises, debate, red teaming.
Democrats, having conversations, having conversations.
Yes. Yeah. We have so much work to do if we want to embrace the future and realize that Donald Trump, love him or hate him, has actually pulled something off here amazing by courting an entire sector of the electorate that was neglected and seeing the possibility and working with people. He seized the day.
Yes.
And Democrats need to learn that lesson politically, but also for the nation. They need to get beyond brute associations of negativity and do in-depth study and research. I realize that takes time when all you're doing is fundraising. That's why we're here.
Well, we appreciate the in-depth study and research you're doing, as well as the work that you're doing behind the scenes, the conversations you're having. Troy, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, Frank.
We'll be in touch, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.